This week on the show, we are talking about entities and trapped emotions. This is a huge portion of the work that I do and that I really, really love doing. So, in the beginning of the show, I talk about what trapped emotions are, how they can manifest in the body, and I also give a perspective on emotions using the Chinese medicine theory of the five elements. I also talk about trauma and kind of define the different traumas that we have, because with trapped emotions comes trauma. And I talk about kind of why we shouldn't be creating a hierarchy around our past traumas and traumatic events. Then we go into entities, talk about what entities are, how they can manifest in the body. And I also discuss how we can remove trapped emotions and entities, and also what it means to be working with entities. I do want to take a moment of appreciation and just say thank you so much to everyone who's shared their feedback so far on the podcast and last week's episode. It means so much to me that you guys are enjoying and you guys are returning again every week. It's mind-blowing. I really so grateful for all of you. This is a topic that I am just so ready to share with you all, and I hope you enjoy. You are listening to the School of Whispers podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, and this is my space to get real, open, and weird about my life experiences as a psychic, medium, energy healer, and student of Chinese medicine. On the show, I'll be sharing my healing journey and the concepts I've learned along the way, and I'll be having guests on talking about the same sort of thing. I am so happy you're here, and I hope this show leaves you feeling inspired and empowered to learn how to listen to the whispers of your own body and spirit. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to another episode of the School of Whispers podcast. Today's topic is all about removing trapped emotions and entities. A quick disclaimer I do want to make is that all of this information I'll be talking about is from my own research and experience. I'm sure there's plenty of other people out there who have their own definitions and own perspective on the subject matter. So all this is from me to you. If it doesn't resonate with you, that's totally fine. You may just want to find someone else to explain the topic. I can't help but feel like there is a lot writing on this recording because I have recorded this podcast before twice now, and not in this sitting, just in different moments throughout the year. And one of them was lost into the ether, and another I did a whole recording without turning on my microphone. Mic is on, ether is on lock, and we're gonna dive right in. It's I don't think it's very lost on me that I am going on this topic because I've kind of been dealing with the entity that is COVID for the past week or so. Actually, I do want to share something that was kind of interesting that happened. Right before I got sick, I had a dream that night that I was sitting down with a man, and he was just describing to me how I was going to feel in the morning. He was saying, your head's going to hurt, your eyes are going to hurt, your body's going to hurt, and you're going to be really, really sick. And I want you to know that it's time for you to level up. And right when he said that, I wake up, I just feel all the pain that he told me that I was going to feel. And it's really been interesting because I feel like it feels very different from any other sickness I've had. The brain fog is really, really tough, and just this sense of not giving a shit about anything, just really struggling to focus, whether it's for the podcast, for any School of Whispers with my clients, or social media. I haven't been able to see any clients for the past about a week, or a little over a week. And also with school, I just haven't cared about any of it. I remember a few times I've been sitting here just trying to muster up the willpower to give a shit, and just the internal response was, I don't care. I'm going to drop out of school. I'm never going to see another client again. I don't want to do any readings again. I don't even want to meditate. Fuck the podcast. Which I know none of these things are me. But it was, I guess, something I needed to honor. And I think that's a great segue into the topic of entities and trapped emotions, because I think that when I speak about entities, I'm referring more to the dark side of entities. Anything and everything in itself that has a strong amalgamation of energy is going to be an entity. There are powerful, benevolent entities such as ayahuasca, the plant medicine, and then there are powerful, not so benevolent, but malevolent energies, such as the I was going to say demon, the amalgamation of a demon, but honestly, I don't believe that demons exist on their own. I believe humans create demons, and demons aren't really on the topic of entities. So another time, another day. Before I really dive into all of this, I want to discuss trapped emotions. This has been it's kind of like the prerequisite to entities, and it's been a massive game changer in my life, and in terms of the many modalities of healing that come with trying to remove trapped emotions. So let's take it back to 2021. I'm finally, after being a sickly person, or just believing that I was a very sickly person for so much of my life, that I was sensitive to food, I was sensitive to everything around me, always allergic, always reacting, I was listening to a podcast, actually Luke Story's podcast, The Lifestylist. He was interviewing Dr. Joe Dispenza. And Dr. Joe was saying, those people who are really good at eating well, they exercise well, they sleep well, and they prioritize all these things, yet they're still so sick. And they're always asking themselves, why am I so sensitive? Well, Dr. Joe says, the better question is not why am I so sensitive, but rather, when am I done being so sensitive? And then he kind of proceeds to talk about how our health, our energy is a product of our belief, of our perspective. We are 99.99999% energy. And that other 0.01% is matter. Yet we live so much of our life focused on the matter, on the physical. And by this point, I had tried so many diets, so many different things to stop being so sensitive. And so one, I felt a little bit personally called out by this statement. And two, I felt extremely empowered by this statement, because all of a sudden something clicked in me. I realized that I was completely in control of my healing and of my state of being. As long as I believed that I was an unwell, weak person, I would remain that way. And so what I started doing was, in my meditations, I started visualizing myself and really focusing on the energy. And what's so cool is actually this was 2020. This was the end of 2020, and then the beginning of 2021 was the the dawn of all this psychic stuff. That was in January. But so I started to just look more into how energy would play a role in my life. And I came across this book called The Emotion Code by Dr. Bradley Nelson. And what he discusses in his book is basically that emotions are energy. Emotions are nothing but an amalgamation of energy with its own unique vibrational frequency. There's going to be emotions that are high vibrational frequency that make you feel light, like you're floating, life is good, like love and joy. And then there's going to be emotions with a lower vibrational frequency that's going to be more uncomfortable and difficult to hold space for in your body, such as guilt, shame, anger. So as we live our life, our bodies, which has its own unique vibrational frequency that is created through the frequencies that we are constantly inundating ourselves with, whether it's with food, our environment, music, people. Energetic hygiene in terms of more than just spirituality, more just being a human is something we need to be so cognizant of. What sort of energy are you bringing into your space and through your body? But so as we experience life, we experience these unique vibrations, these unique energies that are emotions. And sometimes we experience emotions that are too much too soon for our body and our nervous system to process. And so what happens is they get stuck in our energetic fields. So another name for your energetic field could be your aura or your light body. It's the unique vibrational field that you emit. It's the vibrational field that you pick up on when you walk into a room and you notice that somebody has wonderful energy or bad energy that you want to stay away from. We are all aware of energetic fields subconsciously, whether you know it or not. You can be typically people with empathic qualities. They are much more aware and in tuned to picking up on other people's energetic fields, but we are all capable of doing this. And notice that I said empathic qualities because I'm not going to really dive into this now. I feel like this could be a whole podcast topic in itself, but I really completely have thrown out the whole idea of people being empaths and people being narcissists, because the conversation of empaths doesn't usually exist on the internet without the conversation of narcissists. You are you. You are an ever-changing being. You can't be a blank anything. It's just not reality. It's not the truth. What you can be, though, is somebody with empathic qualities, or you could be somebody with narcissistic qualities. You could be somebody who, in front of one person, you are more of an empath, and in front of another person, you take on a little bit more of that narcissistic personality. We are ever changing. Anyways, so trapped emotions, they first manifest within your energetic body, and because their energy is going to be a lot less dense. We don't tangibly see emotions. We feel them, right? But then over time, trapped emotions, as they exist within your field and start to attune themselves to our dense physical body, they start to match the vibrational frequency of our physical body, and they manifest within the physical body. So in terms of Chinese medicine, every organ has its own special emotion, and these emotions will typically, not every time, will typically manifest in a specific area of the body according to that organ. So to elaborate here, I'm discussing the 5-element theory in Chinese medicine, if you want to look that up. So let's start with the 5 elements. We've got fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. The organs that are associated with the fire element are heart and the small intestine. The emotion that is associated with this fire element and these organs is joy. And I want to say right now that it is absolutely normal to experience every spectrum of emotions. You are supposed to feel the spectrum of emotion. What creates pathology is not the experience and the expression of emotions. It is the inability to fully express emotions, whether it's you are unwilling or you just don't know how. On the other hand, emotions can become pathological when we're unwilling to let them go. For example, an addiction to joy, or feeling grief and just not allowing yourself to move on, maybe after a death, just obsessing over the loss and the grief, and being unwilling to move forward. So those are really the 2 ways that emotions can become pathological. 1, lack of expression, or 2, kind of an obsession with the expression. Okay? So a scenario where joy could be pathological is when you're kind of in a manic state. If you're somebody who kind of teeters between feeling very depressed and then very, very up, kind of that bipolar disorder sort of deal here. But also, joy could be pathological through an addiction to joy, an addiction to pleasure, addiction to dopamine. Maybe think about what is something that is so typical in our everyday society that induces this addiction to joy. If you guessed social media, you were reading my mind. It's definitely an issue here. But anyways, and then because I think that sound and emotion go hand in hand, the sound for joy for the heart and the small intestine is laughter. And of course, as you can imagine, where the heart manifests is right in the heart chakra. Another thing that I have noticed with the opening up of all my psychic gifts is that smell is something that I have picked up on. If I'm working with a client in person and we're close enough, I can typically smell like a certain quality to them, and I'll understand what is kind of the strong overriding emotion here. And in terms of 5 element theory, and it does add up with my sessions, the smell for fire is a scorched smell, kind of like burnt hair in a way, or burning rubber. All right, so that was element 1. Element 2, we got earth. The organ for the earth is spleen and stomach, and the emotion for the earth is worrying. And worrying sound is kind of like a sing-songy sort of voice. If you think about a mother who is singing to their child. And then the smell would be like a rotting smell, like an overripe fruit smell. And this is probably the smell that I pick up on the strongest when working with clients. But also I think it's just because worry is such an epidemic of an emotion in modern society. I really truly believe that. I know I used to be this way, at least, that a lot of life experiences, a lot of events that are important, we believe that if we don't worry about them, then they're not important, or that we won't perform, or it won't be the way that we hope it will be. So that's earth. Let's just go ahead and establish here that these elements and these organs and these emotions that I'm discussing, they relate to the chakras. So earth, worry, spleen, stomach. It's going to be your abdominal, your solar plexus chakra here, where it will manifest physically, typically. All right, so back to it. Next element is metal. The organs of metal are the large intestine and the lung, and the emotion is grief. The sound is weeping, crying, and the smell is sort of like a pungent smell, like kind of like a stinky cheese. This one I haven't really, I've worked with a lot of clients with grief, but it's always been remote. So I've yet to really tap into this exact smell here. And where the emotions of grief typically manifest is, like feeling kind of your chest, but it's really more, the lungs really manifest in the skin and the nose. So respiratory issues, chronic congestion, chronic sinusitis, chronic skin issues could be related to grief. Next is water. Water's organ is the kidneys and the bladder. So kind of the area where your kidneys reside, and also they really just dominate in Chinese medicine. If someone has chronic lower back pain, you're going to think kidneys. So lower back, and then of course the bladder is in your bladder area. So kind of that second chakra, but also in Chinese medicine, where around L2, L3, which is your kidneys are around the same area, is a really potent energy source called your dantian. And your dantian is kind of like it's like the well of your life force energy that we pull on constantly. Like when I do my Qigong, in between a lot of sets, I will hold my hands hovering over the front of my abdomen, right around L2, L3. And you just feel, if you want, you could hover your hands right now, just below your belly button. And you could feel this if you're tapped into what energy feels like. Sometimes it's heat. For me, it feels like a tingling, whirling sensation. But it's just a really, really potent, important space in your body where you hold energy. And the emotion of the kidneys is fear. The sound for fear is groaning. So maybe think about somebody kind of getting up off a chair, like having lower back pain and kind of going like, ugh. But also when you're dreading something and you're groaning because you just don't want to experience it. The smell for fear is kind of like a rotting smell, kind of not the same as the rotting fruit with worry. It's more of I know this is going to sound messed up, but like a rotting flesh smell, kind of like, or kind of like, when older people, like much, much older, like when you're in a nursing home and it just has a specific smell to it, that is the smell for fear. And this is actually one of the other ones that come up the most when I've done sessions in person, is I can smell that fear on people. And I really think this particular issue is just so fucking relevant to our modern day, because we are constantly inundated with news and media and stories of all these fear-inducing topics, whether it's COVID or war or economic collapse or food shortages, where it's like our energy in this specific area, in your dantian, the most potent source of energy in your body, is being constantly attacked every day by the media. What? Why would they do that? I have no idea. Anyways, I'm not going to get into this. Okay. The next our last element actually is wood. This one is I am a wood type person. And if you want to look that up, I recommend looking up the 5 element theory and body types. There's so many rabbit holes you can get into with the 5 element theory. I'm really just scratching the surface here. But the organs associated with wood are the liver and the gallbladder. And the emotion of wood is anger. And the sound of anger is yelling. And where it typically will manifest is kind of like around your rib cage. If you experience a lot of cramping along your ribs, that could be a pretty common area. But I also think anger can manifest or be stuck in the throat. So with all these emotions, where they can go wrong is, as I mentioned before, the refusal of expression or the inability to express. So I was the classic anger repressed person. I had all of these very specific liver channel symptoms because I spent so much of my life being afraid to express anger. And it's a whole story, but where it kind of began was I grew up going to Catholic school, and the thought of possession terrified me. And I truly, truly thought that if I allowed myself to fully feel my anger, then Satan and his cronies would be like, all right, this bitch has gone dark. Let's go and possess her. And I wasn't fully aware that I was holding on to this fear all the way to my young adulthood, all the way till about 24. And my eyes were always red and dry. I had a lot of cramping along my rib cage. My joints just felt so weak, and I had a lot of acid reflux. And knowing what I know now, that is your typical liver case. And those symptoms didn't really subside until I allowed myself to fully express anger. It's wild. Okay, so this is just me putting Chinese medicine into the mix because I use my knowledge of Chinese medicine in my sessions with people. In case you haven't realized, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of a lot of my work. Yeah, I do psychic readings. Yeah, I do mediumship, but what's been the largest development and how I've been able to make the most difference with my clients is through the removal of trapped emotions. And I will get into how I do that, but we got a lot of background to cover here. So I'm going to step back to the emotion code because they have a chart. If you Google motion code chart, they have a chart of all the organs and all the emotions that can be associated. And through muscle testing, if you want to know more about muscle testing, you could check out my Instagram. You can listen to one of my first episodes on communicating with your guides, ancestors, and higher self. I don't have the time to get into it now, but the book encourages you use muscle testing to figure out what trapped emotion is dominating here. How I do it now with my my training with my teacher at school and with the Qigong is I will hover my hand over someone's chakra systems. I'll feel where the most energy is kind of intensely spiraling out. And then I will pull up the chart on my phone and then kind of use my finger and kind of scan the chart. And when I'll feel like a shift in my hand that's hovering over the area that's carrying the trapped emotion. I'll either feel like a shift in my hand as if somebody's like blowing wind on me, or most typically I'll feel with the hand that's scanning the chart, I'll feel kind of like a buzzing, whirling energy. And then from there you can find out when the trapped emotion came to be. You could do this with muscle testing. Typically, what often happens is, for example, I'll say like, oh, there's the trapped emotion of anger in your right hip. And sometimes they'll know right away what that was from. And then they'll ask me, is that it? Could it be from that? I'm like, well, you are much wiser and much more aware of everything that's going on inside your body than I am. You know best for your body. So if that's what comes to mind, let's honor that. And another thing that I do that's unique to me that I haven't learned how to teach others is I will kind of keep my hand over the trapped emotion and I'll tune in. I'll let go. I'll make the intention to let go of everything I think I am and everything I'm not. I will state that I'm here for the higher good of everyone involved. I'll call upon my guides, ancestors, higher self, as well as those of my client. And then I just empty my mind and allow whatever to it's almost like a story to come in, and then I'll relay the story to my client, and it's always just exactly the thing. It's been it's been very interesting doing it that way. I don't always like to do it because I do experience all the emotions that come with that memory, and it doesn't always put me in the right mindset. So I typically prefer muscle testing, but every once in a while I'll feel the call. I intuitively just do what my body calls me to do. All right, so that's trapped emotions. And again, they can manifest physically in the body. So they can manifest as headaches, as body pain, as cramping, it can be acute, it could be chronic. And something else to mention is a lot of people believe that, for example, let's go back to the right hip pain. So there's pain in your right hip, I tell my client, and the trapped emotion is anger from the age of 12. And they'll say, well, hold on. Well, my mom didn't let me go out for to a party, and that's the only thing you can really think of. But I mean, I'm not holding on to that. I don't still hate my mom for not letting me go to the party. And also, that was no big deal. It was just, a 12-year-old giving a shit about a party. Like, I don't care about that now. But here's the thing. You were experiencing a lot of anger that may have been too much too soon for your body to fully process and experience. And just because it's not the forefront, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been affecting you all these years. What's happened here is this emotion has become trapped in your subconscious library. So our conscious library is everything that's kind of in the forefront of your human experience. And then your subconscious library is everything that has and hasn't happened to you that you just can't remember. We have so much going on in our human lives that if we were left with all of the information that has and hasn't happened to us across all timelines and dimensions, we'd be probably very confused and just easily distracted, I'd imagined, and probably traumatized constantly. So it's okay that this has happened, and it's okay that right now you're looking back at that memory and you're like, that was no big deal. The thing is with trauma, I'm gonna actually take a moment to define trauma the way that my therapist told me. So we've got our big T's. Our big T's is kind of what we believe that all trauma is, that it's this big life-changing event, whether it's a death or an accident, losing your home in a natural disaster. And I used to think that that was the only trauma that existed. And I remember just thinking, why do I have all of these things wrong with me, all of these reactions, these sensitivities emotionally, and yet I haven't had any trauma happen in my life. And so my therapist started to explain what little t's are. And I don't love this separation of big T and little t because, again, it creates this hierarchy. The reality is all trauma affects the body, period. There's not one trauma that's worthy of your time and attention and your reaction more than another trauma. Okay, so don't try to create a hierarchy of what a big T and a little t is. But what the latter is kind of like the little things that have happened over your life, whether it's something that did happen or something that didn't happen. Not going to that party, being bullied. Maybe you wanted to show your mom a drawing when you were 3 years old and you're like, mommy, mommy, mommy. And she finally and she was having a hard day and she snapped and was just like, Stephanie, no. Drawing down, leave the room, bad girl. That in itself can create a trauma and a trapped emotion. It could also be little things that are totally normal to your family and for some reason it just doesn't work well with you. Truth of the matter is, trauma is not abnormal. Experiencing trauma is a total normal part of the human experience. It's really the emotions and the behavior that are the reaction to the trauma that can be pathological, that can be abnormal. All right, so let me reel in my thoughts here for a second. Yeah, I think I did a good job on explaining trapped emotions. I think it's time to transition into entities. So entities are, let's baseline define it as an amalgamation of energy. That's what it is. And it has a specific goal. So when we are alive as humans, we have these personalities that we develop, these personality fragments. And typically when we die, these personality fragments dissolve into the ether. We don't take them with our soul. Our soul is, personalities are of the ego, of the human. But sometimes that doesn't always happen. So let's use an alcoholic as an example. So personality that's really strong within the alcoholic is addiction. And when the alcoholic dies, addiction is just such a strong, heavy, dense, low vibrational energy that it remains within the quantum realm and it's looking around for a host. It didn't dissolve and, return to the everything that and nothing that is source. It kind of stayed within this realm, and it's very uncomfortable. It doesn't like to be alone. And so it's going to start the search for a new host. It's going to start to look around for a vibrational match to its own. And where's addiction going to find a pretty good vibrational match? Probably at a bar. So addiction finds a human who has a really strong trapped emotion of anger. And anger, it's a pretty good match for addiction. So this entity's checking out this human, sees this trapped emotion, and's like, hell yeah. We found home, let's hop on in. So it hops on into that body. And because entities, their main goal is to survive, and they're very good at it. They're going to push its host to experience the trapped emotion of anger, and which is going to propel this person's addiction to whatever it's his or her substance of choices. And so that this amalgamation of energy can continuously survive and feed off of that vibrational match. So using myself as an example, because this really was the beginning of my ability to heal others. My professor, Dr. Adamson, he scanned my body and found a trapped emotion of abandonment and unworthiness in my hip. And I had a lot of chronic hip pain that I was struggling with that I don't feel anymore, just saying. But it all of a sudden came to light that I was living so much of my life out of the belief that I was going to be abandoned and that I was unworthy, and also out of the fear of abandonment and unworthiness. So I was constantly finding myself in all of these scenarios of either like doing whatever it took to avoid those emotions, but it would propel me further into experiencing those emotions, or just being proven right. Oh, yeah, of course that happened because everyone's going to abandon me one day and I'm not really worthy. So, yeah. When these entities were finally removed, I was able to observe my behavior. And this is something I always tell my clients after removal, is all of a sudden, you're going to be very observant of your behaviors. And personally, I was very frustrated with myself because I was no longer emotionally attached. Those emotions of abandonment and unworthiness were no longer there. But because I'm human, because behavior doesn't change overnight, I was still participating in the behaviors. And so it was like 3 to 4 weeks of rewiring myself and relearning how to be. And wow, it was so worth it because I truly know and I believe and I act and behave out of the knowing that I'll never be abandoned because I am loved and I am so worthy just because I am worthy. It's a great place to be. So right. So as I mentioned before, a prerequisite towards having an entity attachment is going to be having a trapped emotion. And there's so many ways that you can remove it. Something I do want to mention is because entities are so good at existing, they are going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you won't remove them. So when I first met my professor at Dr. Adamson, I just decided I did not like him. I don't know why. Well, I didn't at the time know why. I was just like, I just don't like him. I don't want to be around him. I don't like him. And it really wasn't, it was by chance that I came across his path for a removal. It wasn't something I was actively seeking out. And something that was really interesting was, well, what had happened was somebody that was in his Qigong class asked if she could scan me. And when she scanned over my lower two chakras, I could feel something inside of me like pushing against my skin. And I looked at her and I told her, "Hey, that felt funny." And she goes, "Yeah, I could feel that too. What you have is really strong." So she called in Dr. Adamson. And I remember watching him walk through the door and thinking, "Great, this guy." And then when I really felt his energy enter the room, I told him, okay, whatever is in my lowest two chakras does not like you, because I could feel it whirling like a little tornado inside of me. And I think that if I had known that he could do removals, I would have just avoided him. And that is something that I experience with some of my clients. They'll reach out to me saying they need help. And then I'll ask them if they want to schedule something, and they'll be like, actually, never mind. Or we'll get really close to the time of the scheduled time for removal, and sometimes they'll bail last second, or when we call, they'll tell me I almost didn't want to do it because I was feeling so sick and so anxious. So know that is totally normal, and that is just entity behavior. So the different ways that you can remove entities is, well, if you read the emotion code, actually, I wonder if you can. So you can remove trapped emotions on your own by using magnets. You're going to have to read the book Emotion Code because I don't have the time to explain it fully to you. But that's one way that you can remove trapped emotions. Oh, goodness. Something else I got to mention here. Trapped emotions won't always be yours. An entity might not always be yours. It could be something that's generational. I have removed on both my mom and my dad's side alone through muscle testing, through the emotion code way. I have removed generations of fear. Like, it was on my mom's side, I think 5 generations back, and on my dad's side, 4 generations back. And I removed the fear. And what was really wild so what catalyzed this was, I was on a walk and this guy like comes out of his house and starts yelling at me and telling me like, come here. And I kind of just like, leave me alone. And he just started running after me. So I started running, and the whole day I was just like, could feel fear coursing through my body. And also my twin sister was going through something at the time. And so I removed, using the emotion code way, I removed this fear. And then what's crazy is something that my sister was going through about 2 days later came to a head. And it was a very fearful situation for myself, my mom, and my sister. And all three of us were kind of in the throes of this event. And my mom and I were really able to hold our own while experiencing this fear for the goal of helping my sister. And that was not lost on me when after that event happened. I remember sitting there being like, holy shit, did I remove fear and then kind of bring it within the ether for me to act out this lesson or act out this what's been removed? I don't know if that made sense, but anyway, to me it did. And so that's one way you can remove trapped emotion. Another way that you can remove trapped emotions, which I did unknowingly. This is when my journey with anger, I did something called a dynamic meditation. It was just like it's an hour long of really intense physical purging and expressing. So without knowing, I removed the trap emotion of anger through that. So you can use ritual and dedication. It really requires a lot of dedication and a lot of presence to remove one of these things on your own through something other than the emotion code or through something other than Qigong. And then when it comes to entities, I think it's possible to remove entities on your own. But here's the thing. If it's trapped to an emotion that's yours, it's going to be really, really difficult to get around it. And I say this specifically because when I've done removals on my clients, I get entities jumping on me all the time. And I'm not afraid. They're not something to be afraid of. What I like to tell, how I like to explain entities to my clients is kind of think of it as like a little kitten that, or how about like a young adult cat, right? Because they're at that asshole stage where they're kind of just really brutal. Like they're just constantly attacking you. And so it's like a kitten that's in that young adult phase where it wants to attack everything it sees, and it also has all these infections and worms, and it gives you worms, and you're kind of like, oh, you're poor and like pathetic, but I also don't want you in my house anymore because you're making my life a living hell. I like to tell my clients to look at them like that because it kind of starts to align you to a vibration of compassion. And also, I think a really important vibration to align yourself with when doing this work is appreciation. Without the darkness, the light cannot come in. So this removal is a moment for you to remember what we are all capable of, which is doing this sort of dance with the darkness in order to bring in more light. And also just reminding yourself that you deserve a beautiful life and you don't need to have these emotions hanging on you, and that there's hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. So appreciate this moment. Maybe right now, close your eyes and breathe into the space where you feel the most discomfort or the emotion that holds the strongest within you, and just appreciate it. Tell them, I know you're here. And I know this is part of my experience, and I know that it's going to bring about a chance for victory, a chance for healing. If you listen to my podcast episode with George, The Whispers of the Unseen War, a quote that George often shares is the greater the struggle, the greater the triumph. So this is your chance for your light to come through. I digress. So I get a lot of entities attached to me. And with this happening, what a typical sign is of a new attachment, or maybe an attachment that's kind of been aggravated and not fully removed, which is, it happens. And actually, sometimes I notice what can happen if somebody has a lot of darkness, a lot of heavy dark attachments, is when I remove one or two entities within a session, then it's going to make space for something that's kind of been sitting deeper within their plumes within their body. It gives them space to finally come up and out. And again, this isn't a moment for you to feel fear or to feel upset or be like, get the hell away from me. It's more of a moment for you to appreciate that finally this darkness can come to light. Finally, you can move on. So yeah, when I'm in a session with a client and we remove a lot of entities, they will be, and if I'm not, I try to be as thorough as possible with kind of returning them, asking my higher self or my client's higher self to remove the entity and send them to the ether. They'll still attach themselves to me, and kind of how I know this is, one, I'll have a hard time sleeping, or two, my hip is my canary in the gold mine. Because I've had such a chronic blockage of chi and blood flow to this area and I'm still rebuilding it, if I have an attachment, it's going to find the most empty space to in my hip. So I'll feel really intense hip pain. But what's really cool is because I have such a strong relationship with my higher self and I don't have a bunch of trapped emotions anymore that are kind of a for sale sign or for rent sign for an entity to catch onto and latch itself onto, I just ask my higher self to remove. That's literally all I have to do is I use muscle testing and I say, hey, higher self, do I have an attachment? Do I have an entity? Yeah. Okay. Can you remove it? Yeah, you can. Okay. And then here's the trick though. The question to ask now is, will you remove it? Because sometimes your higher self wants you to learn a lesson from this experience. So if she will remove it, then I kind of just feel a little bit of like a whoosh through my body, and then the pain's gone. Or I'll tune in and ask, hey, is the entity gone? Yeah. All right, sweet. So you can remove entities, or you can ask your higher self to remove entities. It's just that you're gonna have more success if it's not an entity that's yours, and if you don't have a lot of trapped emotions, if you practice consistent energetic hygiene. That being said, one time I was in a session. So with my professor, we do these esoteric acupuncture protocols that kind of open up your chakra centers, and it brings your vibration so high that the realms of this realm and the spiritual realm, the veil is thinner. And it's great for somebody who hasn't experienced many psychic experiences. Actually, if you want to do one, reach out to me. I am doing it now through remote sessions. And I've had a lot of success with my clients. But what's really cool is a friend of mine came over and we did this session with her. And she was in this state, and because I'm able to see people's auras and people's energetic fields, it was so cool. So I'm watching an entity sort of emerge from her lowest chakra center. And what it looks like to me is kind of like murky, muddy sort of colored energy. It kind of manifests as a green or a yellow or kind of like a purple or a brown. And I stood up. I was about to remove it for her, but then I thought, wait. I want to ask her higher self. So I tuned in and I asked her higher self, hey, can you remove this entity that's emerging here? And she's like, yeah, for sure. And I watched, and the girl in the session, she burst into tears, and I watched the entity being pushed out by her own energy. It was like I saw just pure white light kind of emerging and pushing off her body and just pushing the entity out. And then another one came up. So I think she removed by herself about 3 entities, which was beyond fascinating to be able to witness. So as I mentioned before, entities can be from a generational wound. But they could also be from one of your past lives. It can be a trapped emotion that you experienced in a different reincarnation that was just so strong and is just so important to your growth as a soul that it emerges in this lifetime. And how lucky are we that we have the technology to spread the word about these sort of things so that you can just let go of karma that's been holding you down for generations, for lifetimes. Another thing in terms of an entity or a trapped emotion not entirely being yours, something that was really interesting that happened to me was I had an entity within me that wasn't mine. It belonged to my twin sister. The only other time that I've experienced a client of mine having an entity that didn't belong to them, it was with their mom. So right now I'm going to make the assumption that it has to be somebody that you have a really strong energetic tie to. We all have cords, energetic cords with our mom, and we can cut them, but we're born with it. And of course, a twin, that's a pretty damn strong karmic energetic tie there. So that's possible too. That was actually really difficult for that to be removed through Qigong, which is the form of energy healing that I'm trained in and that my professor does. And actually, I was able to with my one client, but I really, really had to work with his higher self. Actually, a practitioner who removes entities for you, it's not them doing it. Like, it's not me. I'm not this capable. It is me asking Stephanie to step aside so that my higher self, who's really good at removals, as well as their higher self, my client's higher self, it's a chance for them to come through. And I've even had passed on family members come into a session, and I had my one friend, she has a family history of healers and kind of like witchy women, and the spirit of her great aunt came in, and it's so cool because she taught me how a kind of like a different form of removal when removing an entity from a crown chakra, which is the very top of the head. At least in my personal experience, removing crown chakra entities is difficult. So it was really cool to have her come in and share that with me. So that's my big spiel about trapped emotions and trauma and entities and all that good stuff. The last kind of message I want to give you, though, is, as I mentioned earlier, an entity isn't necessarily this personality fragment that gets trapped in your body. An entity can be a benevolent being. It can be a malevolent being. Something that it's kind of been brought to my attention in the spiritual world is it's really normal for healers to work with entities. For example, kind of the first being entity that kind of came into my realm was the angel Seraphina, who is the archangel of family relationships, and somebody who's recently kind of come into my field is the goddess Kali. The entity is of the goddess Kali. And she is the goddess of chaos. She really is. But she can be very, very useful sometimes when I'm in a removal. Sometimes I'll kind of feel her energy step in, and I'll kind of call upon her and ask her if she has any advice to give. That being said, an entity, regardless of it being good and loving or not, does not belong in your body. I do not recommend inviting any entities to enter your field or body in order to bring about more healing or more power. Any entity that is offering that in exchange for a place within your energetic and physical body is bad news. And guess what? Because they're so good at getting what they want, they can disguise themselves. When I'm working with my clients and with entities, I am moving in between using muscle testing, tuning in, and how I can be sure that an entity, whether it's I'm working with the angel Seraphina or the goddess Kali, is I tune in and I ask if they are here for the higher good of everyone involved. So I tune in with muscle testing, but also I kind of use my astral body to lean in towards their energy. And if I'm leaning in and I feel a little bit of discomfort, like a little bit of prickling around my forehead, or my heart starts racing, or it just doesn't feel right, it feels icky, then I know that that is not who I thought it was, and I banish them. I either push my energy out or I ask my higher self to take care of it. But if I lean in and I feel a lot of love, or with Kali, it's more of a presence of acceptance of darkness and light. Nonetheless, it's a higher vibrational sensation. If I feel that, then I know that I'm safe to work with this energy. And again, to clarify, I'm working with them. I am consulting with them and listening to any advice they have to give. I'm not inviting them into my body to perform any removals. The only one who is allowed within my body, who already exists there in order to perform removals, is my higher self. Because I don't trust entities. Like I said, they're good at getting what they want, and they have no qualms in lying to you and telling you, I am the great master Odin of the Norse gods. They will absolutely lie to you in order to get in a little piece of this whole human experience. And why do they want to experience this? Because living life in the 3D, believe it or not, I know it can suck, but it's really fucking great. I've spent a lot of time astral traveling and doing all that stuff. And guess what? It's kind of boring. I mean, it's really cool. It's really fascinating. And there are moments where I felt just this otherworldly love and connection. But for the most part, especially traveling around the world, oh my God, astral travel is so boring. I want to travel somewhere and eat the food and smell and experience and meet people. And it's the level of experience that we feel in the third dimension is just so gorgeous and valuable. And also, as human beings, as spiritual beings having a human experience, we are an amalgamation of source. We have source frequency, that all-knowing, all-loving power, home, that where we come from, where we return to, we have that within our very cells. And entities know it, and they want to be a part of it. And they believe that they need us in order to experience it. And when I remove entities, guess where I bring them? I return them to source. I ask my higher self or their higher self to help them return to source. So it's where we come from, it's where we return, and it's within all of us. So yeah, you don't need, in order to experience any sort of power or leveling up, you do not need to invite in an entity. And any entity that's convinced you otherwise is full of shit and is bad news. And also, guess what? That applies to human beings too. Humans can have entity behavior. So maybe take a moment and think about anyone in your life, or maybe a behavior that you take part in where you believe that you need somebody to experience more love or more connection. If you need something outside of yourself to experience more loving connection, that is not favorable behavior. That is a negative entity type of behavior. All right. I really hope I didn't forget anything. This is such a massive topic. If I do, I guess I'll just have to throw it in to another podcast. Thank you so much for listening this far, as always. If you enjoy this episode, please share it with somebody and consider leaving me your review. And if you want to work with me, if you feel like you're in this entity talk and you're feeling some sort of funkiness whirling inside of you, or if this just sounds like something that you want to take part in, to maybe learn more about, or maybe to experience a removal, I am able to do distal sessions and in person. So if you want to reach out and work with me, find me at my website, schoolofwhispers.com, and my social media will be in the show notes. All right, that's it. I love you guys. Thank you for being here, and I'll be feeling your energy next week.